Thank you all for coming out on this, our second attempt at a ribbon cutting, if you will, for the space that we have here. I was telling Dr. Clune earlier, I'm beginning to think the National Weather Service looks for events that we plan in Talbot's Theater so they can schedule the storms around it. First off, I'm going to invite Dr. Clune up to give a welcome, if you would.
Thank you. It's great to be here. My wife Allison, we are so proud of the spaces on this campus. This is a perfect example of a collaborative space. It's first class. It's as good as you'll find anywhere in the country. I also want to thank Senator Chabert, who's with us today, who has done so much for this institution. He has just ended his final term. He's brought in over $25 million to the university, unprecedented in terms of legislative support. And what we're cutting the ribbon on today is a reflection of his work for his alma mater. And we're going to miss him so much, but we're going to figure out a way to keep him involved because we need him at this institution. So I want to welcome all of you. It's great to see you out there, and I'm excited to cut the ribbon today. Thank you.
Once again, I really appreciate you guys coming out. When we originally scheduled this in the spring, it's a little bit easier to do because you have the faculty and members of the Nichols community that are here, and unfortunately, because it's a summer and people had already scheduled family events, not many of our faculty could be here, but I'd like them to stand up quickly. We have Barbara Blake, Linda Martin, Andy Simoncelli, Farron Clark, Lance is over here behind me. These are the members of the mass communication faculty, and we wanted to welcome you here. And once again, I appreciate you taking time because I know there's a lot of family things that you guys are trying to work with too. Okay. I think that the Nichols community spends so much time on a regular basis doing the things that we need to do to get the job done, that we don't take enough time to really reflect on the things that we've accomplished as a community. So I thought it'd be appropriate today to spend a few minutes talking about the path that got us to where we are today. It's really trendy in today's world, in my profession, to talk about what's called convergence media. Well, we've been doing convergence media at Nichols since Dr. Delahaye arrived here in 1957 to begin teaching journalism. We have always insisted that our students not only learn about various media platforms in their academic program, but that they have access to student media operations, quality student media operations across campus where they can learn by doing. And that includes things like the yearbook, the newspaper, and KNSU. A lot of people don't realize that while they are associated with the academic program, they are not the academics separate. We'll see in just a minute where a number of students who worked on those various media outlets never studied journalism and yet got a journalism education. As a matter of fact, Miss Leslie Marcello, who was a longtime advisor to the yearbook and the newspaper, she was twice elected National College Media Advisors, the national organization. She was their president, and she had two, I think, All-American ratings for the newspaper during her tenure here. But she had students working in her office who were pre-med majors and who are now doctors. Supreme Court Justice John Weimer, who was a business major in the 1970s, did a radio show for KNSU and wrote for the Nicholsworth. And if you ask him, he'll tell you those experiences were among the most important in his development as a legal scholar and a jurist. Laura Browning Crochet, who's in the audience here, she was a three-time editor at La Pirogue and has gone on to be a very successful academic researcher and educator. So we've always taken a broad-based approach to the formal education program. We've never been a trade school here. And so our students and the alumni success that they've experienced is not just the mass communication faculty, but it's professors from art to biology to math to marketing, philosophy. Those teachers were just important to student success as the people who taught mass communication courses. And the formulas worked out pretty well for us. In 1987, a group of state-appointed consultants arrived on campus with the task, essentially, of trying to convince then-President Dr. Donald Io that we shouldn't be teaching journalism education here at Nichols, that it wasn't for us, it was for the big boys, LSUs, what have you. After spending some time in Thibodeau, they left so impressed, they said, well, not only should you should continue the program, but you should seek national accreditation. And we did that. By 1994, the department had earned the accreditation by the Accrediting Council on Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. I need to put that in some perspective. There are only 112 fully certified programs in the world by the ACJMC. And of that number, even prestigious schools like Auburn and NYU, who were up on the same cycle we were, are usually, frequently, I'll put it that way, found out of compliance on at least one, if not two, of the standards that the ACJMC uses to judge schools. In the last accrediting cycles, going back 4 cycles, 24 years, we've only been found on a compliance on one standard one time. So it's pretty impressive. What about the success of our graduates in various fields? Well, Mark Plaisance, who couldn't be here with us today, but originally was going to be here, he went on to become a lawyer and a city judge, I believe, at one point. He argued a case before the Supreme Court a couple of years back and won. So Nichols 1-0 before the Supreme Court. Or Cooper Collins, who had been the head of a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company before leaving that for a better job. And they're graduates of this program. As we tell our students, the skills are developing or in demand by a whole host of industries. And those who have pursued mass media careers have done the university proud as well. This includes Corey Haig, who led 3 digital news teams to Pulitzer Prizes. Tresha Mabil, international documentary filmmaker whose work appears on channels like the National Geographic Channel, CNN, or Joey Kennedy, who won a Pulitzer Prize for editorial writing. Martin False, who somewhere in the room, oh, there you are, okay. So Martin's story is, last week I'm reading on Facebook that he's had some serious health issues and he's in the hospital. The next day I'm being told he's on the television reporting about the incoming storm. And so if you live in Terrebonne Parish, Lafourche Parish, when a storm's in the Gulf, the first thing you do is turn to HTV. So Martin is another example of our successful graduates. Ken Wells, former front page editor of the Wall Street Journal. We have one alum who's the incoming president of the National Association of Schools of Journalism and Mass Communication. So that's all the schools in the country that are members of that organization. Sonny Alvarado, former president of the National Society of Professional Journalists, who still serves on the Accrediting Council and is even now helping that organization redraft its accrediting standards. Or Jill Elmont, who until recently was the Vice President for Integrated Marketing for Warner Brothers Worldwide Television. All those people went to school here. But to put this list of accomplishments in context, remember some universities produce more than 900 mass communication graduates a year. We've only graduated about 850 mass comm graduates in the history of the program, and about an equal number of people who worked for various student media platforms but majored in something else. So as a percentage of those people who got an education here in journalism, that's pretty impressive, I believe. And while it's impressive, it doesn't really begin to tell the whole story of the impact of Nichols on the national media landscape. If you've ever binge-watched the Game of Thrones or used Google Maps to navigate a new city, you might want to thank Congressman Tozan, who in the 1990s was the head of was a member of the Telecommunications Policy and Committee in the House, which helped draft a lot of the legislation that created the framework that we use for today's modern media. He would go on, I think in 1997, to become the head of that committee. So, I would say that overall, Nichols as a university has punched well above its weight in media influence. And I would also say that the overall value of a Nichols education is far too often underappreciated, because I'm talking to you today about the areas of mass communication, but if we had somebody from education or nursing or somebody from some other department, they could tell you stories equally as impressive from their departments. So it's really a Nichols story, not just a mass communication story. So the purpose of today's event, I called it a ribbon cutting because I didn't know what to call it, and I had somebody asked me earlier, well, where's the ribbon? I said, well, I didn't actually think that part of it through. But the purpose of today's event is to recognize who helped give us the university the tools it needed to keep its media facilities, both for the academic degree program and for student media, current. Around 2012, Dr. Boudreau, who was then Vice President of Institutional Advancement, began conversations with Mr. Al Danos, who, along with his wife, Mary, were longtime supporters of the arts at Nichols. Mr. Danos said he could help raise monies to give the Mary Danos Theater, opened in 1969, a much-needed facelift. During the course of that effort, Mr. Danos had a conversation with Senator Narby Chabert. And he said, well, I think we can aim a little higher than that. I think we can do some things to help the entire building. And as a former DJ at KNSU, he said, look, I spent a lot of hours at KNSU, and KNSU could use a little sprucing up too. So at the end of the day, he led an effort to get about $800,000 in state appropriations in 2014 for upgrades to the radio and television operations here on campus as part of a, if I remember right, $4.4 million of monies toward to the building as a whole. In 2015, Mr. Lance Arnold and Dr. Andy Simon-Selly received a Board of Regents grant for just under $90,000 to purchase television equipment. So within the span of about a year, during a prolonged period of dramatic cuts to higher education across the state, Nichols received close to $1 million to improve radio and television operations. Because of state rules governing the expenditures of this money, it took us a little time to make some of the purchases, but pretty much everything is in place now. I think we have a few little T's to cross and I's to dot, but we're pretty much done with that. So what you're seeing and what students are using every day is the latest in technology, from green screens to drones. So where do we go from here? Well, Dr. Kloon, when he first arrived on campus, one of the first things he did as president was to approve two proposals that had positioned mass communication education at Nichols to take the next step forward. First, he signed a measure that allowed students to vote on a ballot initiative that would preserve existing campus media, including the yearbook, and expand student media television operations. Under this proposal, drafted and vigorously, I may say, defended and supported by student government leaders such as then SGA President Tommy Thibodeau, Student Rights and Grievances Director Peyton Chassaw, and Austin Went, who was Vice President at the time. They pushed for that hard, and Dr. Kloon, when he arrived, he signed that measure to let students vote. Students did vote, and they voted overwhelmingly. I think it was like a 2-to-1 margin or something like that to accept the proposal, which would not only preserve these platforms, create a new platform, but do so at a more cost-effective total than they were paying 2 years previously for less content. The second thing the administration did, which was also tremendous, we had been fighting for about 2 to 3 years to relocate, well, we've been doing it longer than that, but formally, to relocate student publications into this building. It just seemed to make more sense to us. Students would be closer to the heart of campus, they would have greater access to faculty, and more importantly, they would be able to work collaboratively across platforms. And so Dr. Kloon agreed to that proposal as well. He also pledged both university funds and his assistance in raising private contributions for the establishment of a Convergence Student Media Center here, which I think Lance has a couple of those pictures up. And as you can see, this is an artist rendering. It's a conceptual thing, but it looks really, really great. The students who've they were involved in the planning of this and the discussion of it, and they're really excited about it. So that's the next part of this. Where we are right now is a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we opened bids for the second phase of that space over there, which is to make the space habitable, safe to use for our students, to get them into the building, which is going to be a tremendous thing. This would be the third phase. Some members in the audience here today, Ms. Marcello and a couple of others, are helping us to see about raising some private monies to match the state monies to make that possible. If everything goes well, our goal is to be in that space come January of this next academic year. And we feel good about that at this point, but we're still working on that.
My station manager at KNSU was Mark Menard, who works at WWL now, WWL Radio, and handles all of the sports programming there. And we chat from time to time, and he's very aware of the progress that we're making here. And I really, my handle when I was a DJ was Norby at Night. But it wasn't that kind of show. I was just on at night. And I really, really enjoyed it. And the final story I'm going to share with you is the call that I can still remember where I was when a very good friend, Al Danos, called and told me the family's endeavor to improve the theater here. And he said, listen, I don't need anything from you other than your good name. Would you lend that to our fundraising effort? And I said, that's no question. You didn't even have to call to get that from me. I said, but what do you do? He said, well, we plan on renaming the theater after Mary, and it really needs some upgrade. You all, many of you, those of you who do not know, Mr. Al, unfortunately got confined to a wheelchair later on in life, and we had a lot of ADA compliance issues, and when we would put on a production, we have to pour Al on the stage, frankly, to watch a lot of the shows. And he had coordinated a lot with Mike Davis, who's here with us, and about what needed to be done. And I shared with him, I said, Mr. Al, you don't know this about me, but let me tell you a little bit. So I finished with a government degree, which is housed, at the time was housed here and in Pelche. And I said, I studied speech, and I studied this, and I studied art, and I studied all these great things, and I probably spent 75% of my academic time on campus in Talbot Hall. Talbot Hall is very important to me, very special. It's probably my favorite building on campus. And I said, you also don't know this about me either. I said, but I was a Nichols player. So I spent a lot of time on that stage. The captain of my acting troupe at the time was this really tall, and he wasn't, but he is now, a woolly, gray-haired fellow who runs a wetland center in Houma right now, Jonathan Foray, who was right after the Robin Williams movie where they stand on the desk and say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." He made us call him, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Jonathan has a great personality. But I said, here's another thing you don't know. So I was also very involved in the Nichols radio station runs at Nichols. I said, I'll get involved with this. How much do you think you're going to raise? And Mike, I think he said, we're going to try to get $1.5 million. And I said, well, we'll match that. And he was like, are you serious? We can do that. I said, man, there's nothing the state likes more than somebody to come to the Capitol with money in hand and say, can you help us do this, and not hat in hand and say, would you pay for this to happen? We've been very successful in this region, whether it's levee protection or things here at Nichols, in going to the Capitol with money, be it through student fees or private donations or what have you, to get a lot of things done for the improvement of this university. Mike and I went back and forth on a lot of issues as it relates to this, but one of the things that I conveyed to Mr. Al very early on, and we met with the family, and they wholeheartedly got on board, is so we can't just, if we're going to put all this money, what was the final total? Was it $6 million-ish renovation to the building? So it can't just be about remodeling the Danos Theater. It can't just be about remodeling the foyer and fixing that depth trap of a slick humidity surface we had out there for so many years. Instead, it really needs to be about the student experience. We need to upgrade as much technology as the state will allow. Dr. Stewart alluded to some of the finicky rules we have as it relates to capital outlay on what you can spend money on. But I said we really need to focus on renovating as much of the building as we can, and most importantly, make it truly impactful for our students. It was very disheartening as we completed this process to learn that there were some controversies in some of the previous administrations on whether or not things like your yearbook was important, or the keeping of the journalism aspect of the student experience as important. We find ourselves in a transitional time in media where things are changing, but they're often remaining the same. And one thing that has always kind of been in place and is going to be in place after is that if you're not doing it, you're certainly going to be left behind from whatever it evolves to. Traditional print journalism is changing. Traditional broadcast media is changing. Things that are starting to, when you see entities like HBO leave cable providers to start streaming services where you can do direct access, and some of the most famous writers are now doing blogs and webcasts and this, that, and the other. Our students would have the opportunity to even participate in that if we didn't continue to fight for things that are evolving. And just like this building didn't get everything it needed at first, James said it's phase this, phase that, and one of the messages I conveyed to Dr. Clune when he took over was phase everything, right? This is phase one, this is phase two. And when you pay for phase two, get on phase three. So while I will not be in the role of legislator, I'm always going to be in the role of supportive alumni, and that'll never go away. So wherever we go, I hope to be a part of it, and I look forward to the many future phases of Talbot Hall and the Mass Communications Department and the Journalism Department, and wherever we go, I'm just so happy that wherever I get to say the place I came from is Nicholls State University. So thank all of you who made that possible.
In the list of accomplishments that I was going through before, there was one I omitted that I want to rectify now. We were the first university in the state to actually have a broadcast operation, meaning that we didn't tape things and send it off to local cable affiliate. We actually broadcast live. The man that made that possible is Bob Blazer. You maybe see his picture on the wall over there if you have it. That's named for, the studio is named for him. Ruth Blazer, his wife, is here today, and I wanted to recognize her as well. Not only that, but she her family establishes a very nice scholarship that we still award our students. So keep coming up with more things that I want to add to the list, but I do want to thank you again. So that kind of wraps up our the formal part of our process here. We have students and faculty around if you want to kind of tour the facilities, if you have questions. If it's anything about TV and radio, I don't know how any of it works, so ask the students. But we'll be around, and thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.